We're going to dive in.
I have fractured over 200 times, Charlie, which is
Whoa.
an insane amount of times to break your bones. I wasn't really feeling super fulfilled. I had this mad year at the beginning of the pandemic. Almost accidentally, this new career was born where I kind of eventually transitioned out of IT and became a keynote speaker around speaking to companies and telling them how to do a better job supporting disabled people.
And it's obviously very much linked to what we do. But first thing I always ask my guests is for them to provide a little bit of context about what led them to where they are today and where they started. So can you take us on a bit of your journey?
Yeah, so with my journey, I guess, from a personal perspective, I do have lived experience with disability. I was born with a condition known as osteogenesis imperfecta, which I always smile when I say that because no one's going to remember it, as soon as I finish the sentence. But what it simply means is I have brittle bones, so my bones are more fragile than the average person, and also they don't develop and grow in the same way that the average person's bones would. So if you look at me, I think you can only see like from my chest up, but if you had like a full visual of me, I am about 3 feet tall, and I use a mobility device, which in my case is a power wheelchair. And so I guess a big part of my childhood was trying to navigate, the challenges that present through having this condition. So I think we worked out that I have fractured over 200 times, Charlie, which is an insane amount of times to break your bones. And especially when I was younger, because I was even more fragile when I was younger, it would typically happen through things like sneezing or coughing or, even turning in bed a certain way could cause a fracture for me. So I guess the early part of my life was just trying to figure out how my body works and try not to hurt myself. But also trying to balance that with, being a kid and wanting to do silly stuff that kids do. Because a lot of my injuries actually just came from, me doing stuff which is okay for other kids to do, but for me, if I fall over, then that's quite a severe injury. And then I guess kind of navigating through the school system, my parents decided to put me in a mainstream school. I think that's what we call it. So they thought, let's see how I would do in a mainstream school, and if I can figure it out, then they thought that would be an ideal place for me to learn about life, really, because as soon as you finish school and get out into the real world, not everyone's going to make those types of heavy accommodations for you. So I did manage to, get to school, make friends, graduate eventually, and then I went to uni where I did computer science. So I've got more of a technical, nerdy background. So I was a software engineer for a while, working for different big companies, mainly in financial services and tech consulting, but basically just building IT systems for them. Um, until, after doing that for 8, 9 years, I had this mad year at the beginning of the pandemic where, some interesting things happened. My mom got sick and passed away. I was also in a place where I wasn't really feeling super fulfilled through having a corporate job. At the same time, I had been kind of dabbling in public speaking because I was having to do more presentations at work. I had joined this thing called Toastmasters to improve my public speaking. And so when I had this mini life crisis, I thought, you know, what is the one thing I'm enjoying right now? And it turned out to be the public speaking thing that I was learning. So I kind of doubled down on that, and I'm really skipping, but eventually did a TED talk, and then eventually started having organizations reach out to me saying, hey, Winston, you're not such a bad speaker. Why don't you come and talk to our groups, talk to our team, come on our, away day or our conference and share your story. And so almost accidentally, this new career was born where I kind of eventually transitioned out of IT and became a keynote speaker, sharing these messages around leadership and disability inclusion because those are kind of the areas that I'm really passionate about.
Or we shall stop talk, but we're going to dive into some of it. But the first question I'm going to ask was it was something really random, but I was really curious about how it all came about. Obviously, you grew up in the UK and then moved to the US. How did that move happen, and what was your experience been of the US? Because obviously there's a lot of controversy in and around the
Mm.
US at the moment. So I just wanted to sort of dive into that part of the story because I'm just curious.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And actually, yeah, that's another big part of my story because when I met my wife, so we've been married, I should know this. I've been married almost 5 years now. It's going to be our fifth wedding anniversary this August of 2025. And when me and my wife first started, I guess, dating, we both realized that we individually had aspirations to move to America one day. So we didn't really have like a plan or like a route to get to America, but just through conversation and through getting to know each other, it was like, huh, so America was on your kind of vision board too. And she was like, yeah, and I was like, yeah, as well. And so we got married, and then I think during, just kind of that early stage of marriage and even leading up to the marriage, that conversation kept coming up over and over again. So we're like, okay, are we just gonna keep talking about this thing, or are we actually just gonna take a step towards it? And so my wife, she's someone who just, when she decides to research on a topic, she'll do the deepest dive that
That's
could never
me.
be
That is so
done.
me.
And so she ended up watching a YouTube video where this person, I think she was Canadian, and she was explaining the process and the exact visa that she applied for to allow her to move to America for, I think, initially 3 years. And so my wife found this video and she sent it to me, and I was like, yeah, but it's YouTube. Like, is it trustworthy? You know, the girl who was in that video, she even shared the details of her solicitor, her attorney that helped her with the immigration process. And so my wife kind of said, yeah, but let's just at least email the attorney and see what happens. And long story short, the attorney was like, yeah, I think you guys qualify because you guys do content. Winston is a motivational speaker. There might be a way for you to get in through a talent visa. And so that's what we ended up doing. But then remember, we got married in 2020, so that was the year of the pandemic. So travel was not really a thing, let alone trying to move to a different country. And so our move was delayed up until 2022 when everything felt like it was a little bit normal. Um, but by then we had a kid, we'd had a child. And so we're thinking, do we still want to do this? Does this make sense as a family move? Or should we just kind of let it go as, something that we should have done when we were single? Um, but yeah, we did it anyway. So we took the gamble and honestly ended up in Atlanta, and we really, really love it here. Especially for the weather, which is 100 times better than the UK.
Fair enough. I hear that. I wanted to dive in as well a bit of because whenever I think of moving abroad, there's always for me is and I'd imagine you went through something similar as a disabled person. You naturally think, Jesus Christ, the amount of like logistics and everything you're gonna have to go through. Like obviously, particularly going over to the US, everything comes private healthcare. You're used to the NHS. How did you navigate that? Because even for me, thinking more so down the lines of moving to another European country, I'm like, is it worth the headache? I don't know.
Yeah. Now, honestly, like the healthcare here is it's so different to what we're used to. Like I've never had to go and see a doctor and then pull up my credit card and pay for a service. Like, because in the NHS we get all of that stuff included. You can go see your GP, you could go if you need to go to A&E or to the emergency room, then no one ever asks you to put your hand in your pocket and pay for those services. So that's a challenge in terms of like the financial side of it, because basically your healthcare depends on what you can afford, right? And that's not always a good way to provide healthcare because not everyone can afford healthcare. And if you have a disability or if you have an illness and maybe you need medication or maybe you need like extra therapies and stuff, then it can get really, really expensive. What I will say on the plus side of it is because healthcare here is privatized, you really do get like a premium experience. Yeah, so like even, a couple of times had to go to like the emergency room, nothing too serious, but just precautionary. And, I remember being in A&E in England and just knowing it was going to be a long night. There was one time I accidentally spilled some boiling water on myself and I went to the A&E. And I'm telling you, Charlie, I arrived there about 9 p.m. and I got seen at about 4 a.m. in England.
Yep, don't
Um,
doubt it. I don't doubt it at all.
because I just kept getting pushed down the list because people kept coming in with even more serious injuries, blood pouring out of their heads and stuff like that. Like, okay, cool. It's going to be a long night. But here in the US, we've been to emergency rooms, we've been for different appointments, even pediatrician appointments with our child. And it's honestly like a 10-minute wait max. And then, like, the facilities are up to date. Like, it's very rare that they'll put you in like a shared ward. You usually have your own room, even just for waiting. So yeah, it's a premium service, but then you kind of have to balance it with the cost of everything. And also the process for signing up for healthcare, it's not really intuitive. There's so many websites that you can choose from. It's almost like picking your car insurance. You go on
Yeah,
comparethemarket.com
yeah.
and then like you get so many like different options, and then you have to kind of figure out which one is applicable for your situation and how much of a deduction that you'd have to pay. It's complex, man. But once you get it up and running, it's decent. The only downside is, like I said, the cost of everything.
What about when it comes to like mobility aids and stuff like that? Because that was one of the things that I was wondering. Like the only experience I've had of the American healthcare system is I had a major surgery back when I was like 12. So I completely can hear everything you're saying of the experience what I had was absolutely flawless, and it was like, wow, why can't we be more like this at home?
Yeah, honestly, sorry, what was your question? It was about the
What's the journey when it comes to like mobility aids and
yes.
getting hold of those in the States?
Yeah. Mobility devices. So again, it depends on which insurance plan you have because they can factor different things in. So in my case, or for someone who uses a mobility device, you would need to pick the insurance plan that also covers you if your mobility device breaks down or if you need to get a new mobility device. Because if you don't pay attention to all the T's and C's, then you just end up not being covered, and then your chair breaks down or your scooter breaks down, and then you're gonna have to pay for that yourself. So the plans are there. There is coverage for it, but I think that's where I was speaking about the complexity of it because you really have to like make sure that everything that you need, in your situation is covered in that plan because they're not very generous. These insurance companies,
They never are.
they're just gonna say, oh, oops, you forgot to mention you had a scooter. Don't worry, we'll take care of it this time. No. So you have to be super careful.
What obviously not directly because it's quite personal information, but like what sort of costs do you like as a general rule of thumb over in the States? What sort of costs are you looking at?
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you, for our situation, and again, remember, you tailor your insurance depending on your needs. So, there's no like typically what do people pay. It's just based on what you need. So for us, we're a family of three. Obviously, I have a disability, and I use a mobility scooter as well. So just to make sure that we're all covered to a decent level, because this is the other thing as well. They have like these levels, um, kind of like I don't remember the wording, but it's kind of like gold, silver, and
Yeah,
platinum.
yeah. I know the ones. It's like the travel insurance. Yeah, I get
Yeah,
that.
yeah. So like I think we're at the gold level, which I don't know if that's the middle or the highest one, and we pay about $1,500 a month for the family, which
Wow.
is about maybe a grand. I don't know what the exchange is, about a grand.
Yeah, about a grand.
Yeah, in the UK. Yeah,
That's a lot.
it's a
That's
lot.
a
Like that's like paying rent somewhere.
Yeah, that's a lot. And then I'm sitting there thinking, oh, but then I guarantee most Brits listen to this going, yeah, but then that doesn't get taken out of your pay packet. But then I'm also like, the taxes as well will still come out as well. So that's that. Yeah.
Yeah, and especially for me, and maybe I should make a distinction because I'm self-employed, so my health insurance kind of runs through the company that I've set up for my self-employment. But if you are employed, let's say you work for a big company or a corporation, typically your health insurance will be included as a benefit within your employee package.
Package. Yeah.
Yeah. But I don't have that because I
Self-employed.
am the company.
Yeah, I am the package.
I am, yeah, I'm the one who's supposed to be providing healthcare to my employees. So yeah,
Yeah,
so
that's
exactly.
crazy.
Yeah.
And then obviously, in particularly in the workspace you're in at the moment, with what's going on in the States in terms of DEI, what's the impact been of that? Obviously, it's been quite recent, so I can't imagine there's been too much. But what's your gut instinct towards it at the moment?
Oh no, that there's already been an impact. It was pretty much an immediate impact. So I guess just for context, there's been a lot of change with the new administration. You might have heard of, a certain new president who's, changing a few things up. And yeah, I guess there's different kinds of impact, but it seems like initially I was concerned because it sounded like anything to do with DEI or, diversity would be impacted by, the changes. So, a lot of funding was getting reduced. A lot of companies were even being, kind of discouraged from promoting DEI and initiatives like that. But it's the way it's kind of manifested now that we're a few months in is it seems like there is a distinction even within DEI. So the areas that I feel like are being targeted the most are identity based initiatives. So when I say that, I mean things like race and gender, especially. Those initiatives are being really targeted by the changes with the new administration. However, disability is, fortunately for me, it's a little bit protected from it because also with, the administration and Americans in general being super patriotic, a lot of their military community tend to be people with
Yep, yep,
disabilities
yep.
because, they've served in different wars and, yeah, and some of them have acquired a disability through their service. So the administration, it seems like, is protecting disability primarily for that reason. There might be other reasons as well. So, so yeah, I guess in terms of my work, initially at the start of the year, it was like, oh, what does this mean? And everyone trying to figure out what it meant. So it was a quieter start to the year than what I would typically see. But now that people are understanding, okay, this is this is how they want to position disability, and they want to kind of keep it a little bit separate from general DEI. It's kind of been a bit reassuring for me because now organizations are still open to working with
Yeah.
me, and they're not thinking, oh, are we going to get in trouble for talking about disability? If that makes sense.
I mean, the whole concept's mad anyway, but I think you are right. I think it's interesting. I never pulled on the thread of they are super proud of their veterans, and as are we, to be fair.
Yeah,
But that it is a big thing out there. It's a I saw so much of it when I was that it's like ingrained deeply in them.
very much so. There's a lot of patriotism, a lot more than what I have seen in the UK growing up. Uh, I mean, you cannot drive 2 miles without seeing an American flag. Like a lot of houses just have an American flag just on their doorsteps. So yeah, they do really, and I kind of admire that too. They really have pride in their nation.
Also, any sports game you go to, out comes the national anthem, no matter where you are.
Yeah, but actually, one of my pet peeves with that is like, you know, fine the national anthem, but also like in their sports, they'll label like the final of like the NBA final, let's say, they'll label it the World Championship.
Yeah, the
And
World
I'm like,
Series. It's like
ah,
no, it's just the Americans.
it, it's a national competition. You haven't played anyone outside of the US, but anyway, we'll go along with it.
It's the other thing as well is like I always find it funny when we went to the sports games in the States. Of there's that instant judgment of if you don't stand up during the national anthem, you're an outsider. Don't yeah.
Uh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Nah, they'll definitely give you a funny look. Where in the US did you go?
I was so because of my surgery. I was in St. Louis from for 6 weeks.
Got it.
So
Got
spent
it. Got it.
a lot of time there. Obviously going through recovery and everything else. So it was very much like living there for a very short period of time. It was a very strange, like half tourist, half living there. It was very weird.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Oh, no, that's cool. I've never been to St. Louis, but I've heard some good things.
I mean, I'd love to go back purely for like the nostalgia part of it because it played such a big part in my story. But yeah, not got there yet. And yeah, I don't know. I feel a bit funny about the states at the moment. I'm a bit on. Yeah,
Yeah, you're not the only one. I think a lot of people are still trying to work out that there's just a lot of what's the right word? Just uncertainty.
yes,
Like it's
definitely.
like every day you wake up to a new headline and you're like, oh God, how does this affect me? And yeah, I feel like I'm not really someone who dives deep into politics. To be honest, I don't really have an interest per se in politics. But I feel like because of everything going on, we've been just forced to pay attention to things that we normally don't follow that much.
Especially because of everything going on with like the stock markets and everything, it impacts so much more as well. And I think, yeah, it's a tricky time. But diving into a bit more of a funish topic, I suppose, rather than getting too deep into the
Yay!
politics. I want to get a bit more into your transition from working in tech in the UK and then obviously slowly transitioning into more public speaking and doing DI work. I'm really intrigued by what you mentioned there of like that whole I like to call it the quarter life crisis of uh, shit, I'm not quite in the right industry. What the hell am I doing with my life?
Yeah.
Okay, this is what I'm going to do now. Can you talk us a bit more about how you went through that journey? Because I'm also intrigued how disability played a part in that. Because a lot of the time with disability comes some limiting beliefs around it and also the extra barriers that you have to go through.
Yeah. So, yeah, honestly, so when I was at uni studying computer science, the only thing that I could see for myself in terms of career was working in the corporate world, doing some kind of IT job, and just kind of working that job until retirement. That's the only thing that I had on my vision because also I didn't really come from like there's no one in my family who was really an entrepreneur or like people that I could really look up to and say, oh, that person built a business, so I might do that one day. Um, and so the other thing that happened was when I graduated with my degree, I had a really challenging first year or two after graduation because I literally could not find a job. So I had this really good degree from a good uni, and I felt like I was never going to be accepted into the corporate world because there were times, Charlie, when I would do these interviews, and it typically would be like the first round would be like a telephone interview. So I'd always do really well in the telephone interview, and then they'd invite me to do the in person, face to face interview. And I'm thinking of one experience in particular when I was, in the offices of this really huge company, which I'm not going to name, but they're a big company, one of the big four consulting firms, I can say that. And I was in the lobby waiting to be picked up by my interviewer, and waiting, and then I see this guy approaching, and he's kind of looking around the lobby, and there's about three or
It's never,
four.
it's never going to be the disabled guy sitting in the corner.
Yeah. He's looking around and there's three or four of us, and he's like, "Is there Winston Clements here? Is there Winston Clements here?" And I'm literally putting my hand up. Yeah, it's me. And he's kind of like looking past me, like, "Who said that?" Like I'm right in front of you, and it just his brain could not compute the fact that it could be this guy, like the guy who has a disability or who uses a power wheelchair. It could be him. So there was lots of similar types of experiences to that. And the reason why I say that is that by the time I got into my job, I kind of felt like, I don't know what the right word is, like very protective of my career because it had taken so much out of me just to get my foot or my wheel in the door, if I could say it that way. And so, and I feel like this is something that maybe other people with disabilities can relate to because you spoke about limiting beliefs. Sometimes a lot of those limiting beliefs, they come from the internalized ableism that we've all had to experience. And so when we get the opportunity, it's like we're not just grateful, we're over grateful. Like we will work twice as hard, we'll work on the weekends, we will like, yeah, we'll basically do everything that's asked, and much, much more, right? And so I think that's what kept me in that career for so long. Not necessarily that I had this huge passion for IT. I liked IT. Um, but I think a big part of it was almost like a scarcity mindset that if I leave this job, then what are the options for me? Like I need to cling on to this job for as long as I can. But yeah, to your question about that moment where I decided to pivot was as I was progressing through my career, I now reached a stage where, initially I was doing very technical roles. So I was programming, I was doing quality assurance. So I could pretty much work independently. All I needed was like a laptop and, a space to sit down and write my code. But then as I started to progress, I was being asked to do more, client facing work. I was being asked to be more of a leader within the team and like coach people, coach graduates who are coming into the team and things like that. But then that would give me like a panic attack because I hated being in front of people and speaking and, you know, presenting in any way, shape, or form. And so,
Cut.
yeah, which is very weird to say, but I'm actually like a really big introvert, right? And so that's why I decided to then like work on that skill. And when someone recommended Toastmasters, I was like, okay, cool. So I can go there and I can speak to, you know, between 5 and 10 people and just do a 2 minute speech and build up my confidence that way so that I don't embarrass myself at work. That sounds like a good plan. But, things kind of accelerated in a much faster way than I could ever have imagined through going there, meeting my mentor, him pushing me to do a TED talk, and then that TED talk kind of going viral, and then starting off this new career where I was now being invited to speak and to share my story, and then realizing that actually, you know what, this feels more purposeful and like I'm helping out a lot more people than the type of work that I was doing in IT. So I'm just going to keep following this path and see where it takes me. And, so far it's taken me all the way to this podcast.
It's crazy to hear your journey because I think so many people go through it. I mean, like particularly, I'm 26 myself, literally right there with everyone else. But I think everyone goes through this journey. But then that disability just adds that extra layer. Like you said, I always say to people, the problem is with a lot of disabled employees is they have this feeling of almost, the way I describe it, it sounds really morbid, is if there was going to be layoffs and someone was going to get fired, you're the first one to go. And that's a self-talk that I've spoken to so many disabled people about. Of we all have it. We all go, the reason I have to work so hard is because if someone comes in and goes, right, someone's got to go, the first one they're going to pick is me. And
Yeah.
that's such a weird thing that we all have, even though it's so irrational at times, but we all have it.
Yeah, but it's irrational, and I think it's also rational to an extent because just because of the ableism that exists in society, I feel like, and maybe let me speak for myself, sometimes as a disabled person, there's a part of you that thinks you're a bit of a burden. You're a bit of a burden to society, right? And so whether that comes from, I don't know, like needing, you know, a mobility device or something that costs extra for you to live your life, or whether that's, people having to make special accommodations, even in social situations, my friends having to maybe not go to the bar that they really wanted to go to, they had to go to the other one because that one has access, right? That one's got a ramp. So things like that, people don't have to say it directly to you, but that
Yeah.
kind of starts to build a story or a picture in your mind that, damn, like, it's really inconvenient, like, being around me or being employed by me. And so I think that speaks to your point about by the time you get into a job or into a company, and some companies don't do a great job with this because they make you feel like, hey, like we made all of these accommodations for you, so you better make sure that we see the value out of you,
Mm.
kind of thing. So I think that is, like you say, it's a story, but I think there is some truth, at least in the origin of where it comes from.
Definitely, and I think we're even seeing that now. And I mean, it's a topic that I always bring up on this pod of the move, particularly, I don't know what it's like in the States, but there's a move of like everyone getting everyone back in the offices, remote working's kind of dwindling, people are on the fence about it. It's all a bit of a, I'm just gonna say it, it's a bit of a clusterfuck. No one knows like where we all sit with it, because they're like, oh no, get everyone back in the offices because it's better for the economy. Get them in 2 days a week. Rather than, as I always say, there should be the approach of, if you prefer being in the office, 100% go to the office. If it works better for you working from home, work from home. It will, as long as the work gets done. Why does it matter?
Yeah, honestly, yeah, I honestly thought after COVID that we'd kind of gotten rid of that whole like
Me too.
yeah presenteeism thing where you had to physically be in a room for your work to count,
Yeah.
which doesn't really make sense. But yeah, it feels like we're basically going back to 2019, which is it's just weird because we've had 5 6 years for companies and organizations to see evidence that people can be productive, probably even more productive working from home because you also eliminate things like the morning and the evening commute. And actually, I think I read a study that when people are working from home, they just tend to get into such a flow with their work. They just get things done quicker or they end up working a little bit later because they are already in a flow. So for companies, that's actually bonus performance that you're getting out of people. And if anything, it's the people who are like overworking themselves that are, you're almost self-penalizing because you're thinking, oh, I'm home. I didn't have to commute this morning, so I'm just going to work that extra hour that I would have commuted. So yeah, like to your point, it's strange that we're now looking to reverse all of that.
Are you having those with the companies that you go into with the DEI work you do? Are you opening that conversation of why it's a problem going back to it? Because one of the things that I always come back to, and this is a really weird one to point out, but now because I've worked so long remotely, the
Yeah,
idea of being in an office, the noise level, oh my god, I can't. Yep, no, can't deal with it.
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
like, but
yeah.
what is the conversations you're having with when you're going into these companies in terms of DEI and improving how inclusive they are in terms of just adapting their processes? What's their rebuttals?
Yeah, now honestly, I think so. The conversation that I'm having, so there's a couple of things. So one is it really varies from company to company because you could have like a huge multinational company and their rebuttal could be, hey, but we're just the Atlanta office or the London office. If New York say we all have to go back to the office, then there's nothing much I can do about it, right? So there is kind of those hard constraints that sometimes exist, and within a local office, a company may not have much room to negotiate if it's coming straight down from HQ or leadership or whoever the powers that be
Yeah, yeah.
in that scenario, if that makes sense. Um, but in terms of like what I'm kind of delivering and kind of coaching companies on, the way I like to approach it is from a case study perspective. So I will look up a company in your industry, right, and bring up the numbers and the stats that kind of highlight the performance and what the performance has been, since going into virtual working and then since being back either hybrid or full time in the office. And typically you actually see more, of a performance increase when people are working remotely because just for those same reasons that we said, just people have more time and are able to work in their own space. And especially for people with disabilities, like you said, some people don't perform well in a noisy cubicle type environment, right? Um, and even for interviews as well, some people really struggle with coming in for interviews and get super nervous or super uncomfortable that you know, they can't even perform on the interview or answer the questions or do an exercise which they would do in 5 minutes if they could just work on their laptop in their bedroom, right? So for me, I just really try and like maybe shove's not the right word, just give them like case after case, example after example of real people, real companies who are demonstrating that this works. And actually, what we need to be thinking about is it's not a one size fits all because some people do perform better in the office, but it's almost like a tailor-made approach where I want to really get to know my team and my employee. And hey, Charlie, if what works for you best is being in your home office, then let's try that. Let's at least test it out and then measure, how that looks after a couple of months.
Agree. It's that I say it's that whatever works for the individual. If you're going to get the best out of them, that is the best situation. To me, it just doesn't make any sense. Because to your point, the other caveat I would add to it as someone with a disability is most of the time, some of the blowback is that our offices aren't fully accessible, or we've got some accessibility issues. Well,
Yeah.
the easy rebuttal to that is I'm guessing there's a good chance that the person where they live is fairly adapted or they're very used to that scenario. So allow them to work from home and it works. It's just, I honestly just can't wrap my head around it.
Exactly, because in their home, the home is probably set up to be as accessible as it can be, right? So yeah, it just opens up almost like a whole new like path for you to bring talented people in who may not be able to access your office building, but they can still work from wherever and be successful and help you get to the objectives of your company. Like it's such a win-win that it's like, yeah, anyway, maybe they'll listen one day.
On the note of like the companies that you've worked with some huge companies. How do you start those conversations? Because I'm always intrigued with people that particularly work in those sort of spaces where it's just they're so big. To me, I just sit there thinking, where do I even start? So where do you start those conversations?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. So if you work for a giant corporation, typically, even when I get booked to deliver presentations or do consulting work, let's say, for example, I get booked by Google, right? So Google's a huge, yeah, everyone knows Google, right? It's one of the biggest companies in the world. But what I find is typically you'll get booked by a division within Google,
Yeah, yeah,
right? Or it could even be just a team within Google, or it could be the marketing division. It could be one of their employee resource groups, for example, the the Enable network. A lot of them are called Enable, which is like a disability group within an organization. And so yeah, typically I would have been going in to say, hey, here's how the whole of Google needs to change, right? I'll be going in to say like, hey, okay, we're here, we're part of Enable. Like, what are some things that we can do, or how can we, how can I help you have a framework for whatever the objectives are, requesting accommodations, or how can we create a culture where language is more inclusive, or how can we create, hiring processes that are more accessible, more inclusive for people with different disabilities. So it'd be starting small with a particular group within a large organization, and then having a really clear set of objectives for what I want to empower them with, if that makes sense. And then I guess, deep down, I also hope that some of that will filter beyond that group as they go and have conversations and, speak to their managers, speak to their colleagues who are outside of those groups. And then you can almost start like a ripple effect of people at least becoming curious about these kinds of topics
yeah.
and how to be more inclusive.
Not, and I don't mean this in a way of like any issue towards you, but do you ever wonder with the bigger companies that it's kind of that theory that a lot of the cyber community have of it's kind of lip service. They kind of want it because it's a PR stunt and want them to look good. Do you ever worry that your work's being sort of damaged is the wrong word, but like impacted by that? Because obviously you're going in and actively wanting to make real change, but then some organisations haven't got that at their heart, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's interesting with, let me say it like this. So, disability, as well as like all the other areas within diversity, equity, inclusion, and people might fight me in the comments, but I think disability is the least sexy, right? So no one's trying to win points by, or at least not many people are trying to win points by saying, hey, like, I'm all about disability. Like, there are other, like, far sexier
Yeah,
initiatives
yeah,
within DEI. than disability. I mean, some people are for sure. Some people are like wanting to really show that they are allies to people with disability. But if you compare it to things like race and gender, and especially when if I can focus on race for a second. So if you remember back to 2020 when the whole situation with George Floyd happened, right? Corporation was coming forward to say, hey, we are all about Black Lives Matter, we're all about promoting race inclusion and all of these things because that was the thing to do at the time if you wanted to look good, right? And if you didn't do it, you might even look bad because people will be like, wait, why is this organization not saying anything? But I feel like we've almost never had like even the opportunity within the disabled community for people to want to look good for promoting disability, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, I still do sometimes pick up a vibe where, you know, people are not really like they're doing it because it's a job, like it's Disability History Month, and we should try and put on an event and, you know, say something about disability. And honestly, I've gotten to a place where if I really get that sense, I will actually withdraw from the event. Um, and a lot of the, although I do work with a lot of corporations, recently I've actually really been enjoying working with schools and colleges here in the US, and especially spending time with students with disabilities or students with like different like neurodiversity experiences, because I actually realized that is a lot more rewarding, you know, actually having that face time in those conversations than it sometimes is speaking in, you know, speaking at a huge conference to 1,000 people who you're not sure how it's landing or if they really care about the topic as much, if that makes sense.
It's that direct impact, and also it's that, I suppose, so particularly with schools and colleges, it's that kind of shaping. It's a cliche, but like shaping the next generation of like changing their views on what's possible, what's not possible. Whereas I can imagine in a corporate setting where you're just speaking to a large number of people, you don't have that direct connection that you may have with the students.
Yeah, and you don't know why people are there. It could just be like everyone's been told you have to go to this.
Yeah, yeah,
You
yeah,
have to go to
yeah.
this. So, whereas when I'm speaking at schools and with young people, like I can see it in their eyes, like especially those that have disabilities, and from the questions that they ask as well, I can tell that this is something that's really present to them as well. Not that you never get that in corporations, but it's just harder to gauge because of the sterile nature of working for a big company.
Obviously, you've done as well. You've done a lot of work on social media, and I was intrigued because of you mentioned a lot of like how the DEI space has changed. I was intrigued to see what your views are on how social media has changed, and particularly in the disability space. And I asked this question as well because I often am concerned about the disability social media space because I worry that it's an echo chamber. The analogy I give is like it's like two guys who are physically disabled, both wheelchair users, shouting at each other. We need more ramps, and we're both shouting at each other. Yeah, we know, and that's not actually going to impact real change. So I just wondered what your perspective on the position of social media and disability is at the moment, particularly as you've worked in it for quite some time.
Yeah, do you know what, Charlie? Like the way I've approached social media is maybe a little bit different to what a lot of other creators are doing in the disability space. Not to knock their efforts, but I think those tactical things are really important. But the way my social media activism was born was actually more through like my family experience with disability. So my wife and I, when we got married, and this was accidental, we had a wedding video
I thought you
trailer.
meant your marriage. Then I was like, that took a turn.
Yeah. No, the wedding was intentional, but what happened with the disability stuff that we speak about now was accidental. Thank you for correcting me. I would have got in huge trouble. Um, but so we got married, and then we posted a video on YouTube, and the idea was we had this wedding trailer, and we just wanted to get a link to share with our family group chat. That was the only purpose of posting these wedding and engagement videos on YouTube. But then what happened, Charlie, is they basically started to go viral because I guess I didn't really know too much about YouTube back then, but I must have set the videos as public links. And so I kept checking, especially the wedding one. I checked it after a couple of days and I was like, 5,000 views seems like a lot. Like, I don't have that many family members in the group chat, right? And then checking it a few days later, and it just kept doubling in views, getting to 100K. Eventually, I think it got to over 1 million views on YouTube. And thinking, like what's going on here? And then I went into the comments, and now I'm expecting to see a few comments, from, my mom or like my cousin or my auntie or someone like that. It's thousands of comments, Charlie, people all over the world commenting on this video. And I'm like, like, okay, should I be scared? Like, what's going on here? But basically, the video had gone viral, and then we realized that a lot of the comments that we were getting were kind of feeding into stereotypes about disability. So people would say, "Oh, she must have he must be rich. She must have married him for the money because why else would a non-disabled woman marry a disabled man?" And comments like that. Oh, does she know she's going to be his caregiver for the rest of her life? Just really like stereotypical comments for negative things that people think about disabled people. And so the way our social media activism was born was through addressing those types of comments. And the way we address those comments is not to sit down and say, and to just kind of lecture people on things. We thought the best way to do that is we're just going to vlog. We're just going to show a day in our life. We're just going to show, how we work together at home, how we raise our child, how we navigate and use transportation, how we travel, by air, all of these different things. So it's more like a show them rather than tell them approach to advocacy. And we find it to be really effective because now we can see that the comments are changing a little bit and people saying, like, I didn't know that you could drive a car if
Yeah.
you're in a wheelchair and things like that. Or I have this cousin or this nephew and I'm gonna go and share this with them and tell them that they too can get married one day if they want to. And so we found that to be our flavor of advocacy. And we find that it really works, and it kind of works well with the type of work that I do as a presenter, because there I can be more like the teacher and say, hey, like these are the best practices. But if you want to know more about, a day in the life or how disabled people really live, then go check out my YouTube blog and like really experience it so that you don't build up a picture that is filled with stereotypes that aren't true.
I love that as well because it's very similar to how we started at UPC, because it all came from the thing of everyone's too scared to ask a question. So I basically was like, I don't care. You can ask me whatever questions you like. I've covered all sorts of topics on social media, and it was very much like you say, just educating people and taking through the steps. Whereas I, at the moment, see so much negativity on social media in and around disability, and that's what I think is not getting worse. Getting worse is the wrong word, but it's feeding that stereotype issue with it as well. And I think that's the bit that I've always steered away from. I've always steered into that, like, let's keep it happy, let's keep it just informative, and like I always believe that people only know what they know, so you can't judge someone for not knowing, because the only way they're going to learn is by someone teaching them. And my view is, if I can be that person, great. I've helped in some way. But I wanted to dive into a topic that you mentioned there, of every time the sentence gets uttered of disability and relationships, everyone goes mad for it. And I don't understand where I do and I don't. People don't see it all the time. Fine, it's unusual. You have questions, and it's a hot topic. But it's interesting you telling your story of, even that shows the impact of people in interabled relationships or disability relationships. It shows how much impact that has. And I just wanted to get you to sort of speak on it from your experience. Obviously, I can come in with mine, but it's such a strange thing that it's so popular.
Yeah, it's really strange, and I mean, yeah, curious to hear your experience too. But I think from getting married, honestly, and maybe this is why we posted the videos we didn't really think too much when we posted those videos in the first place on YouTube, because for us, it's just our relationship, it's just our marriage. It's not really that interesting. And so it was really surprising to us, the reaction that it got on social media, and maybe even double surprising because a lot of the comments were so negative and so filled with stereotypes, to the point where, and to be honest, it was a little bit frustrating because we're thinking, we just got married. That's usually the happiest day, in someone's life. To that point, maybe having a kid could be on the same level, right? Or more. Um, so why is it that I'm seeing negative comments on my wedding video? Like, can you imagine if, the average non-disabled person posted a photo or a video on any social media platform, and in the comments were just like abuse.
Yeah, no, it's
Like,
crazy. I mean, the other thing as well is like, it's that classic thing of just people don't, because they don't see it, they think it's so unusual. And then with the hate thing, it's just because there's also, I think we spoke about the internal ableism, because the question I always get asked whenever people ask like how I met my partner Gina is always like, what did you do about your dating profile? Do you disclose your disability? Do you not? And I think that in itself disclosed, like, shows the issues we have of like it being seen as a negative rather than the whole, to use a cliche, you fall in love with who you fall in love with and leave it at that, and that's the end of the conversation.
yeah, nah, I agree. I think there's still, and this is something that I used to say in my presentations, but disability is not a dirty word, but it just feels like it has that connotation of being a dirty word. When people hear disability, they can only think of negative situations. And I think I've even done this in a presentation. In fact, I know I have, where I did like a poll, and I said, "What is the first word that you think of when you hear disability?" And people could answer anonymously, and you could see the things that came up for them on the screen. And I'm really thankful to them for being honest, because a lot of it was so negative. It would be like, oh, sickness, oh, unable, incapable, incompetent, wheelchair for life, all of these things, crazy, mentally unwell. Like, these are all the things that are coming up for people. So it's no surprise that they behave in this way towards disabled people if those are the feelings that they've internalized about the disabled community. So yeah, now it's been a challenge, and sometimes a lot of people ask us, like, why do you carry on doing this work? Isn't it too much for your mental health? But honestly, we feel like there's such a need for it. And I think of it in terms of the next generation, young people with disabilities, or young carers or parents of people with disabilities, just giving them that reference point of, hey, there is a path to achieving
Yeah,
whatever
yeah,
you want to achieve in life. And sometimes it takes for them to see someone who looks like them. And not just from a disability perspective, they might need to see not just the wheelchair guy, but the wheelchair guy who also is British, or who also is
yeah.
black, or who also is a woman, or who also is XYZ, right? For it to really resonate with them. So I just try to do my part, and so does my wife, in creating that representation in our own flavor, so that it hopefully helps a couple of people along the way.
100%. One of my favourite things is whenever I get those odd messages from either parents, someone with the same disability as me, or someone with the same condition as me, saying that my content's helped them, because that's exactly why I did it. Because most of the time, it's like you say, it's that no one, until you start sort of getting involved in the space, I think most disabled people have this view of it's just them. It's just them. There's no one like them. They're on their own. Whereas as soon as you start eventually getting involved in the space, you see all these different people. But at the time, most people go, there isn't anyone. So that was where I started. I was like, no one's doing it, so I'm going to do it. And then here I am.
Yeah, no, for sure. And that was me when I was younger. Like, my condition, osteogenesis imperfecta, is because I'm on the more severe end of the spectrum. You don't really see as many people with the same severity. I mean, there are even more severe types than mine, but I growing up, I didn't really see anyone with my condition. I think I saw maybe one or two when I went to a hospital appointment, and we kind of just passed each other in the corridor. And I was like, wait, you look like. Anyway, yeah, I need to get to my appointment. So even just being able to contribute to that, and for a young person who might just be going on online or on YouTube and wanting to see someone who looks like them but is a bit older. Like I remember one fear that I had, growing up was, what's my life expectancy going to be? Because I had never seen, well, I hadn't seen many people with osteogenesis imperfecta, let alone people in their old age with my condition, right? And then obviously now through being part of different communities and through there being more representation online, I know that there are people who are in their 70s, 80s who have my condition. So that's kind of soothed, any concerns that I had. But that's only been like a recent thing in my 30s. I needed to know this at, 7, 8, 9. Otherwise, I was carrying this huge fear for that many years.
It's so true because you need to see people go through the journeys that everyone goes through, but in your situation, one of the things I was going to speak to you about is obviously you've not long become a father, and that in itself creates its own challenges. Like I know myself, whenever people talk to me about having kids, the idea of having kids at the moment is fucking petrifying. It's absolutely. I'm like my nephew's just been born, and even then, I think I've only just started holding him now, and he's about 6 weeks.
Yes.
But the main reason that was because part of cerebral palsy is you get involuntary muscle spasms. So I
Yes.
just had this image in my head that I was going to be holding him, and then I was just going to yeet him across the room, and I didn't know what to do with it. And it's the same thing with like all of the like complications you try to think of when it comes to disability and becoming a parent or a dad. Like one of the other ones I come up with is if when we have a kid, we're going to need like a 7-seater bus because I'm there with my wheelchair. We got the baby gear as well. It's just going to be, it's just, so I wanted to speak to you about like your journey through fatherhood and what it's been like this far.
Honestly, I mean, I had a lot of the same fears before becoming a father. But I think what I realized, the biggest lesson that I've learned is the fears that you have in your head, they never realized, in the same way that you picture it. Like, it's never as big as you think it will be. And then also, even if something is a legit obstacle, there's always a way around it. So, like for me, one of my biggest fears was, am I going to be able to hold my child? Because my limbs are not super strong and they're not super long either. So like even reaching is a bit challenging for me. And then of course I've got fragile bones. So, a child, jumping all over me is not ideal, right? And so that's something that I was concerned about genuinely. Because children don't know, they'll just be like,
Yeah, yeah.
you know, they'll be pouncing on you, bro. And so I didn't know like these types of things. Even thinking about like a stroller, like I don't want my wife to have to do all the heavy lifting or like push a stroller, change the nappies, wash the baby. Like I want to be able to, or at least feel like I'm contributing to raising our child. I don't just want to be a spectator. Um, and so when our daughter came, she's 3 years old now. Um, those were like a lot of things that were playing on my mind. But you realize that you can figure these things out. So with my daughter, for example, and children, they're really smart and intuitive. They really understand, situations more than we give them credit for. So for example, my daughter she knew that I wasn't going to be able to, like, for example, like bend all the way down and pick her up off the floor. So she would like climb up onto a sofa so that she's on my level, and then from that level I can kind of help her onto my lap on the wheelchair, and then she can feel like she's close to me, and then in a way I'm holding her. But we've kind of figured out our own system for doing that. Or if she wanted to play with me, you know I figured out that, okay, probably the best way to do it is for me to get on the floor. So I figured out that I could just create like almost like a staircase of cushions so that I could lower myself from my wheelchair cushion by cushion. And then now I'm at floor level and it's literally like an even playing field, right? And we can play together. With the stroller, I figured out, how I could push it with one hand and still be able to navigate my power chair. A lot of trial and errors and bumping into furniture initially, but then you realize that, oh, okay, cool. Like I can definitely do this. Maybe not uphill. My wife can do uphill, but if we're on a flat surface, then that's definitely doable for me. So yeah, and hopefully that encourages you as well because those things they feel bigger when you kind of try to picture them in your mind or like write them down on paper.
It's
But
like anything. If you're in that situation where you've got
yeah,
come up with a solution, you come up with something. Like I have no doubt that when that situation does come, I'll be fine. It's just at the moment,
and you've got fur babies. You've got fur babies already, so you've had some practice.
yeah, yeah. The benefit of those is they're a bit more robust.
But also remember, kids grow up, right?
True.
So they do get stronger. Like after a year, after a couple of years, they're pretty much fully mobile.
Yeah,
So
yeah, it's true. It's just all those. I think the initial bit is just the initial baby stage is probably the bit I'm most worried about. When they turn into like a
toddlers.
terrible twos, that's just
Yeah.
standard. I can deal with that.
Yeah, when they turn terrible too, you should be worrying about your own safety more than anything else. Health and safety for you.
Yeah, I didn't actually ask you. How did you meet your wife?
Yeah, oh yeah, good question. We actually met during that season when I was kind of still working in corporate, but starting to take the speaking a little bit more seriously. Similarly for her, she was in a place where she she was still studying at the time and she was about to go into her corporate job, but she wasn't really sure whether that was the right step because she also felt like she wanted to do speaking and life coaching and all these other things. So yeah, the way we met was at a networking event. So she was there for like her speaking and life coaching stuff, and I was there for my motivational speaking. Both of us looking to just make connections and learn about the industry. And so we just ended up connecting. Actually, we didn't even speak on the day because I remember they had like a open networking time and we clocked each other. You know when you say, "Oh,
Yeah,
I'll see you,"
yeah,
like
yeah.
I'll come back around and chat to you, but then it doesn't really happen. It was one of those situations, and then I think we went home, and I remember kicking myself, thinking, "Damn, like I really wanted to speak to her," but fortunately, she somehow found me on Instagram, and she messaged me, and she was like, "Yeah, so sorry we didn't get to speak, blah blah blah, but I'd love to catch up," and then we ended up having a coffee. And then through having that coffee, we're like, oh my God, we aligned on so many things. And then the first thing that we did together, we didn't immediately become romantic. We actually run an event together. We thought, hey, like we're learning all this stuff. Let's create an event to also share our knowledge with entrepreneurs who are also starting out. And so through kind of running these events, end up doing like 3 or 4 events and helping a lot of people. I guess we just fell in love in that process. Yeah, and been together now almost 5 years, and yeah, happy and got a bouncy 3-year-old kid who keeps us very busy.
That's crazy. So, how long have you guys been together total? Is it 5? Because I know you've been married for quite a while as well.
Yeah, so we the gap between us sort of becoming romantic and getting engaged was like 7 months.
Damn, you're making
Yeah.
me look bad. I've been with Gina for like 7 years.
Okay. Yeah, Gina, tell him off. It shouldn't take that long. It can be quicker. So yeah, I think so we were friends for a couple of years before that. Obviously, like when we met and then we did those events together. I guess we were more business partners. But as soon as we decided to become romantic, it was like December 2019 that we did, and then in June 2020 we got engaged, and then in August 2020, August of the same year, we got married. So we
Ah,
had like we dated for 7 months, were engaged for 2 months, and then we've been married 5 years.
love that. And also, I love as well, part of your story links to mine. Of As we spoke about earlier, a lot of people come to me and ask, like, what do I do about dating? How does it all work with disability? Do I go on dating profiles? And I always find the questions really hard to answer because I'm like, I didn't find Gina through a dating app, so I'd never had any success with that. So
Yeah.
it was purely a chance encounter, like with yours. And I think that's what I always say to people. I know it sucks because I know I was told it at the time as well. Oh, it will happen when you least expect it. You want to go to shut up. Everyone says the same thing. It will. It will happen.
Yeah, I agree. And did you ever use dating apps or never at
I
all?
tried and failed miserably.
Yeah, same here, same here. Like it's and maybe I mean I've been so far removed from like the whole online dating thing because I've been married. Um, but maybe by now there's an app that is more disabled friendly. But I remember like way back when I was on a couple of the apps, it was just not designed with disabled people in mind.
No.
And you almost felt like you had to hide your disability in order to be accepted onto those platforms. But hopefully, there's been maybe someone can tell us in the comments if there's something that they would recommend if you are a
Definitely. I mean,
person.
as you say, I've not been involved for like 7 years, so don't even like.
I'm retired from dating for
Yeah,
life.
it's yep. It's just, as I say, it's one of those things where it just happens, and people come into your life. Like mine and Gina's story is weird as hell. It's basically quite a very long story short because I know I've said it on here before. My friend went to a job interview and at a major, well-known organisation, and my friend and Gina got stuck in a room, and both of their surnames end at the end of the alphabet, so they got stuck in a room for 3 hours together.
Yeah.
And I happened to be the topic of conversation, and then found out that both me and Gina at the time were running YouTube channels. So I reached out to Gina for advice, and then here we are 7 years later.
Wow. And I was gonna say as well, in terms of like advice that might help someone, like to your point, people don't want to hear it's gonna happen when it's gonna happen because they're like, I want to be in a happy relationship right now. But I think the common thread between both our stories is that we sort of met our spouses through doing the things that we love. For me, it was like, okay, I want to become a motivational speaker and help people. So let me go to all of these events and just see what happens because I didn't know what I was going to learn or who I was going to meet. And I just so happened to eventually meet my wife through that. And then for you as well, through doing your YouTube channel and, maybe not expecting to meet,
Yeah,
your partner
yeah.
out of it, but just by being in your purpose eventually led to those
Yeah.
chance encounters,
I
if
mean,
I
the other
can say
crazy
it.
thing is everyone. I think a lot of people know is Gina. Gina lived 2.5 hours from me,
Wow. Wow.
and yet
So
here we
was
are.
it a long distance thing to begin with,
Yeah,
or?
for 9 months we were long distance, and then
Yeah.
I persuaded my parents to let her move in.
Nice, nice. Smart move. He was like,
Yep.
nah, I'm not commuting anymore.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, not spending any more time on the M25. Thank you. Um, and just before
Fair
we
enough.
finish up, I wanted to
Yeah.
ask you the last question that I ask every guest, which is, what's one piece of politically correctness that you really strongly agree with or disagree with?
Ooh, you did prepare me for this, but let me think. Let me think. For me, although I'm technically in the diversity and inclusion space with my work, I really do struggle with. I don't know if wokeness is the right word, but I think it's especially when it comes to language. So I think language is a sensitive topic. And I think people should be referred to using the language that they receive as
Yeah.
respectful. I think that's really important to say, by the way, before we continue. I don't want people to think, oh, Winston said you can say everything. Um, but I think I'm someone who, from my own personality and my own nature, and maybe this is more of a British thing than an American thing. I feel like with British people, we really try to choose our words carefully, like not in order not to offend, and to the point where it almost becomes like debilitating. Like people will just avoid having conversations because they would rather say nothing than say the wrong thing. And I also think that kind of stops inclusivity because if you don't speak to that person, you're never gonna get to know them. You're never gonna understand their background, their disability, their family history, whatever the thing is. So I really struggle with that kind of like debilitating thing that we have, especially in the UK, of oh, like I don't know what to say, so
Yeah.
I'm just gonna say nothing at all.
I know exactly what you mean, and again, it's exactly why we started NQPC. It was very much I was sick of that whole thing of like, you're. Yes, Karen, I'm in a wheelchair. You can say it. It's not a dirty word.
You
It's
can say
fine.
wheelchair, yeah. You
Yeah,
can call me a black person. It's
yeah,
fine. I have those things.
yeah. And it's like as well. I always say like this is my big frustration where with the conversation around language, and I understand, like you say, that you should use the language that's comfortable to the individual, but also there's so many different uses of language that if you don't allow someone to understand what you prefer, you can't judge them straight off the bat by using the wrong language. Now there are certain terms where you think, yeah, that one's over the red line, and you don't use that one. But
Yeah,
if it's more of a general thing, it's that allowing people to go, okay, that's not the terminology I use. This is what I use. Can you use that going forward? I'm not annoyed at you. Not like we're still going to have a positive interaction.
we're gonna be friends. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
No, I agree because I think it's having grace on both sides because the reason why people are fearful is probably because they made a mistake in the past and they got in trouble for it. So I think there needs to be grace on both sides, which is I'm gonna make a bold move here and talk to someone, but if I do say the wrong thing, then that person should not immediately cancel me. They should educate me or give me some feedback so that I can do it better next time. But the main thing is that we have that dialogue and we start to build that relationship.
completely agree. But to challenge your point, what would you say about? Oh, I've lost my train of thought now. Oh, what a time to lose it! What would you say about like the right? No, I've completely lost it. I'm gonna have to cut this bit out. I've completely lost my train of thought. Oh, that's gonna really annoy you. What was I gonna say? Because you said about where did you say? You said that I had it. Oh, that was it. Right. What would you say about the rebuttal to that? Is then like why do we always have to be educators? So like the answer is like why do
Mm,
I always have to hold the responsibility of educating people about my disability or the disabled community? I have a really hard time with that because
yes,
I'm like, look, if you want the community to get better, you've got to do your bit to make the community better. Yes, 100%. Like there'll be days where you're like, I don't want to be performance Charlie today. I really don't want to do it, and that
yeah,
there's nothing wrong with that. But then I think it's particularly in the spaces we work in, I always
yeah.
get really frustrated because I'm like, you can very easily create a referral culture. So yes, it might be a day where I'm not comfortable, but I can say, look, if you want to find out more information, go speak to this person, message this person, or look at this person's content. So you can still teach them without having to do the whole, here's my personal story, here's
I agree.
everything.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And just to clarify, for me, by education, I just mean education could just mean I can point you to another resource, or it could mean you could say to me, hey, like, do you prefer being called a disabled person or a person with a disability, right? And I could pick one or the other, or say, actually, I don't care, right? So for me, that's education. So I don't necessarily mean that I have to like sit you down for a 90-minute training and like teach you everything that there is to know about inclusive language, because I don't think that's fair on, like you say, the disabled person either. So yeah, for sure. And that's one thing I also struggle with sometimes when working, when I was an employee, um, working in the tech industry as a disabled person. It would get to, let's say, Disability History Month, and typically I was the only like disabled person in the team, or at least with a visible disability, and it would be like, "Hey, Winston, so what shall we do for Disabled History Month this year?" Like, I don't know. What do you want to do?
I'm not the encyclopedia of disability, but then that's also my that's another one of my bugbears is that you can't actually be a fully fledged in my opinion you can't actually be a fully fledged disability consultant because you can never comment on a disability that you don't have lived experience on. You can comment on based knowledge of like this is what the information says. This is what I know from speaking to people, but you can't provide that lived experience. So I always find it really hard when people are like, "Oh no, I'm a disability consultant," but you can't. You can only really consult on your own condition, really.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a weird one.
It is a weird one. And even for me, whenever like I sometimes get invited to speak about different types of disabilities that are not related to mine. And I'll be like, thanks for the invitation, but maybe maybe speak to Charlie. He knows something about cerebral palsy. I can't really speak to that experience through my own lived experience. So I think that's another way of also disabled people, you know, collaborating together, which is why I really think it's important to build these networks so that we actually have the diversity within, you know, training or speaking or whatever content is being put out. And it doesn't all have to come from one person or the other.
It's also providing that like variety of viewpoints, because then they're going to get a more fruitful, impactful or system that we put in place, because everyone, like we all know, working in the disability space, everyone's got a different opinion. And if
Yeah.
you got us all in a room, it would turn into it's like being in the Commons.
It would. And even two people with the exact same disability, they could have a completely different philosophy or perspective on, language, accommodations, all of these things. They could be so different in their thinking. So, and that's why I also enjoy panel style events where you have like different disabilities represented. And then you can kind of hear like all the nuance of things that, I think for maybe non-disabled people, or at least some non-disabled people, they assume that we all sing from the same hymn sheet, but not necessarily. We're also individuals within our disabilities, if that makes sense.
There's a vast difference of opinion across the board, I think, is what I would rebut that with.
Now for sure.
But thank you so much for coming on, Winston. It's been a great conversation, and I think we've covered so many important topics, and it's been great to hear more about your story as well. Yeah, thank you for coming on.
No, it's been a real pleasure, and hopefully catch up next time I'm in the UK.
Definitely. And as always, guys, I'll link all of Winston's details below if you want to get in contact with him or ask him any questions. Everything will be below for you.